Chapter 3 of Rupert of Hentzau. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please go to LibriVox.org. Recording by Andy Minter. Rupert of Hentzau, taken from the Memoirs of Fritz von Tarlenheim, by Anthony Hope. Chapter 3. Again to Zenda. By Heaven's care, or, since a man may be over apt to arrogate to himself great share of such attention, by good luck, I had not to trust for my life to the slender thread of an oath sworn by Rupert of Hentzau. The visions of my dazed brain were transmutations of reality. The scuffle, the rush, the retreat were not all dream. There is an honest fellow now living in Wintenberg comfortably and at his ease, by reason that his waggon chanced to come lumbering along with 3 or 4 stout lads in it at the moment when Rupert was meditating a second and murderous blow. Seeing the group of us, the good carrier and his lads leapt down and rushed on my assailants. One of the thieves, they said, was for fighting it out (I could guess who that was), and called on the rest to stand. But they, more prudent, laid hands on him, and in spite of his oaths hustled him off along the road towards the station. Open country lay there, and the promise of safety. My new friends set off in pursuit, but a couple of revolver shots, heard by me but not understood, awoke their caution. Good Samaritans, but not men of war, they returned to where I lay senseless on the ground, congratulating themselves and me that an enemy so well armed should run and not stand his ground. They forced a drink of rough wine down my throat, and in a minute or two I opened my eyes. They were for carrying me to a hospital. I would have none of it. As soon as things grew clear to me again, and I knew where I was, I did nothing but repeat in urgent tones, "The Golden Lion! The Golden Lion! 20 crowns to carry me to the Golden Lion!" Perceiving that I knew my own business and where I wished to go, one picked up my handbag, and the rest hoisted me into their waggon and set out for the hotel where Rudolf Rassendyll was. The one thought my broken head held was to get to him as soon as might be, and tell him how I had been fool enough to let myself be robbed of the Queen's letter. He was there. He stood on the threshold of the inn, waiting for me, as it seemed, although it was not yet the hour of my appointment. As they drew me up to the door, I saw his tall, straight figure and his red hair by the light of the hall lamps. By Heaven, I felt as a lost child must on sight of his mother. I stretched out my hand to him over the side of the waggon, murmuring, "I've lost it." He started at the words and sprang forward to me. Then he turned quickly to the carrier. "This gentleman is my friend," he said. "Give him to me. I'll speak to you later." He waited while I was lifted down from the waggon into the arms that he held ready for me, and himself carried me across the threshold. I was quite clear in the head by now, and understood all that passed. There were 1 or 2 people in the hall, but Mr. Rassendyll took no heed of them. He bore me quickly upstairs and into his sitting room. There he set me down in an armchair and stood opposite to me. He was smiling, but anxiety was awake in his eyes. "I've lost it," I said again, looking up at him pitifully enough. "That's all right," said he, nodding. "Will you wait, or can you tell me?" "Yes, but give me some brandy," said I. Rudolf gave me a little brandy, mixed in a great deal of water, and then I made shift to tell him. Though faint, I was not confused, and I gave my story in brief, hurried, yet sufficient words. He made no sign till I mentioned the letter. Then his face changed. "A letter too?" he exclaimed, in a strange mixture of increased apprehension and unlooked for joy. "Yes, a letter too. She wrote a letter, and I carried that as well as the box. I've lost them both, Rudolf. God help me, I've lost them both. Rupert has the letter too." I think I must have been weak and unmanned from the blow I had received, for my composure broke down here. Rudolf stepped up to me and wrung me by the hand. I mastered myself again, and looked in his face as he stood in thought, his hand caressing the strong curve of his clean-shaven chin. Now that I was with him again, it seemed as though I had never lost him, as though we were still together in Strelsau or at Tarlenheim, planning how to hoodwink Black Michael, send Rupert of Hentzau to his own place, and bring the king back to the throne. For Mr. Rassendyll, as he stood before me now, was changed in nothing since our last meeting, nor indeed since he reigned in Strelsau, save that a few flecks of grey spotted his hair. My battered head ached most consumedly. Mr. Rassendyll rang the bell twice, and a short, thick-set man of middle age appeared. He wore a suit of tweed, and had the air of smartness and respectability which marks English servants. "James," said Rudolf, "this gentleman has hurt his head. Look after it." James went out. In a few minutes he was back, with water, basin, towels, and bandages. Bending over me, he began to wash and tend my wound very deftly. Rudolf was walking up and down. "Done the head, James?" he asked, after a few moments. "Yes, sir," answered the servant, gathering together his appliances. "Telegraph forms, then." James went out, and was back with the forms in an instant. "Be ready when I ring," said Rudolf. And he added, turning to me, "Any easier, Fritz?" "I can listen to you now," I said. "I see their game," said he. "One or other of them, Rupert or this Rischenheim, will try to get to the king with the letter." I sprang to my feet. "They mustn't!" I cried, and I reeled back into my chair, with a feeling as if a red hot poker were being run through my head. "Much you can do to stop 'em, old fellow," smiled Rudolf, pausing to press my hand as he went by. "They won't trust the post, you know. One will go. Now, which?" He stood facing me, with a thoughtful frown on his face. I did not know, but I thought that Rischenheim would go. It was a great risk for Rupert to trust himself in the kingdom, and he knew that the king would not easily be persuaded to receive him, however startling might be the business he professed as his errand. On the other hand, nothing was known against Rischenheim, while his rank would secure, and indeed entitle, him to an early audience. Therefore I concluded that Rischenheim would go with the letter, or, if Rupert would not let that out of his possession, with the news of the letter. "Or a copy," suggested Rassendyll. "Well, Rischenheim or Rupert will be on his way by tomorrow morning, or is on his way tonight." Again I tried to rise, for I was on fire to prevent the fatal consequences of my stupidity. Rudolf thrust me back in my chair, saying, "No, no." Then he sat down at the table and took up the telegraph forms. "You and Sapt arranged a cipher, I suppose?" he asked. "Yes. You write the message, and I'll put it into the cipher. This is what I've written: 'Document lost. Let nobody see him if possible. Wire who asks.' I don't like to make it plainer. Most ciphers can be read, you know." "Not ours," said I. "Well, but will that do?" asked Rudolf, with an unconvinced smile. "Yes, I think he'll understand it." And I wrote it again in the cipher. It was as much as I could do to hold the pen. The bell was rung again, and James appeared in an instant. "Send this," said Rudolf. "The offices will be shut, sir." "James, James!" "Very good, sir, but it may take an hour to get one open." "I'll give you half an hour. Have you money?" "Yes, sir." "And now," added Rudolf, turning to me, "you'd better go to bed." I do not recollect what I answered, for my faintness came upon me again, and I remember only that Rudolf himself helped me into his own bed. I slept, but I do not think he as much as lay down on the sofa. Chancing to awake once or twice, I heard him pacing about. But towards morning I slept heavily, and I did not know what he was doing then. At 8 o'clock James entered and roused me. He said that a doctor was to be at the hotel in half an hour, but that Mr. Rassendyll would like to see me for a few minutes if I felt equal to business. I begged James to summon his master at once. Whether I were equal or unequal, the business had to be done.